As we come to this video, I would like to continue in 1 Kings, picking up in 1 Kings 18, verse 17 and 18, where Elijah confronts Ahab over the Baal worship. So in verse 17 it says, Vayehi kerot Ahab et Eliyahu. And it came to pass when Ahab saw Elijah, Vayomer Ahab Elav, that Elijah said unto him, Ha atazeh, Ocher Yisrael, is it you, this one who troubles Israel? It is interesting, Ahab, though he respected and perhaps even in a way feared Elijah, could not understand why he felt so strongly. Why was he stirring up others into a protest movement? Why couldn't Baal worship be indulged in by some who liked it? Why couldn't they combine some nice features of Baal worship into the worship of the Lord? Why is he rocking the boat, troubling Israel? This seems to be Ahab's position. Elijah, in response, doesn't give him an inch. He goes on the attack, turning Ahab's charge back on himself. You're the troubler, the cause of all of this. You have forsaken the commandment of the Lord, or the commandments of the Lord. That is, you have cheapened and adulterated and fouled our worship of the Lord so much, and have even let people worship Baal instead of the Lord, that the blame really lies wholly on you, is Elijah's point to Ahab. Now, you call out 450 of Jezebel's prophets of Baal and 400 of the goddess Asherah, and I will take them on in a contest on Mount Carmel to see which God is the true God. Ahab, from whatever motives, consented to the proposal. God controlled the outcome, demonstrating that he alone was God. And so, having read that, just in the Hebrew, in verse 18, this is where Elijah answered, Vayomer lo acharti et Yisrael, I have not troubled Israel, ki im atah, I have not troubled but you, uveit avicha, and your father's house, ba'azav v'chem, in that you have forsaken et mitzvot Adonai, the commandments of the Lord, v'telek acharei habehalim, and you have followed after the Baalim. So Ahab then is charged by Elijah as the one who is the troubler. And so he proposes a contest in verse 19. Va'ata shalach kavots Eli et kol Yisrael al har ha-Carmel. That is, go and gather to me all Israel unto Mount Carmel. Va'et nevi'ei haBaal, and the prophets of Baal, arba me'ot, that is 400, v'chamishim, and 50. And the prophets, nevi'ei ha'asherah, and the prophets of Asherah, arba me'ot, 400, who eat ochle shulchan Izavel, that eat at the table of Isabel of Jezebel. So, with this proposal, let me just make one statement here. Uh, Go call the prophets of Baal. It appears that only the former came to Mount Carmel, that is, the prophets of Baal. Perhaps the latter, that is, the prophets of Asherah, anticipated some disastrous outcome and so evaded the king's command. For a discussion of Baal and Asherah, I think we have talked about how Baal and Asherah were husband and wife, sister, and Asherah was worshipped as the female goddess and Baal as the male. So he goes on, the Baalim is a reference to the local forms or manifestations in which the same Baal was worshipped in different localities. And so we are learning that the contest is about to begin. There is a reference how that these prophets are eating at Jezebel's table. The phrase does not mean that they ate at the royal table itself, where the queen dines, but that they received their food from the palace kitchen, probably, and were permanent members of the royal retinue. So now we come to Elijah's contest on Mount Carmel. And this is in chapter 18, verses 20 to 26. And so verse 20 reads, Vayishlach Ahab b'chol b'nei Yisrael. So Ahab sent unto all the children of Israel, vayikbots et haneviim, and he gathered the prophets together el har ha Carmel, unto Mount Carmel. The word about Mount Carmel is a 14-mile long ridge running northwest and southeast, jutting into the Mediterranean at its northwest end and dividing the coastal plain into the plain of Akko and the plain of Sharon or Sharon. It is about 1750 feet high near its southeast end and 470 feet at its northwest end. Running along its northerly side is the river Kishon, and at its southeast corner, the plain of Esdraelon stretches eastward to Jezreel. The presumed site of the contest is called the place of burning, or the burnt place, a flat shelf that would be about 1,600 feet above sea level. No spot could have been better adapted for the thousands of Israel to have stood drawn up on those slopes. The rock shoots up in an almost perpendicular wall of more than 200 feet in height on the side of the plain of Esdraelon. No more commanding site could have been chosen where all could see the miraculous demonstration and power of the true God. And so in verse 21, the text continues, Vayigash Eliyahu el kol ha'am, and Elijah came near unto all the people. Vayomer ad matai atem posachim, how long will you halt between al shetei haseifim? How long will you halt between two opinions? Im Adonai, if the Lord ha Elohim be God, follow him. In other words, if Adonai is God, lechu acharab, follow after him. Ve'im haba'al lechu acharab. But if Baal, then follow him. Velo anu ha'am oto davar. And the people answered him not a word. As we look at this section that we're about to go into, how long are you going to waver between two opinions? After the people gathered at Mount Carmel, Elijah challenged them to a decision. They cannot serve Yahweh and Baal. They must worship the true God. The Hebrew literally reads, how long will you how long will you limp between two opinions? How long will you keep hopping from one leg to the other between these two opinions? Let's settle it now, once and for all. If Baal be God, then worship him. But if Yahweh be God, he must then be the sole object of your veneration. This is the challenge Elijah lays down and follows with a proposal which will determine the true God. Remember, he had said, if the Lord be God, then follow him. Let me just say some things about Baal and Baalism. As we think about this section, there is but one God, and he cannot be served along with another. The Israelites had been attempting to combine the worship of God with that of Baal, often what happens through time, worshiping the true God or worshiping maybe other gods. It was an unworkable union, and the people were so struck with the sense of their own folly, or else dread of the king's discipline, that they answered not a word to what Elijah was challenging them. Elijah proposed to decide for them the controversy between God and Baal by an appeal, not to the authority of the law, for that could be disputed by people with other legal tradition, but by a visible sign from the supernatural world. As fire was the element over which Baal was supposed to preside, and often he is seen as the god who brings lightning and fire. Elijah proposes that two bullocks be slain and placed on separate altars of wood, the one for Baal or Baal, the other for God. Whatever one being appealed to answers by fire, Elijah proposed, he is the true God. The proposal, appearing every way reasonable, was received by the people with unanimous approval. The priests of Baal led off by calling on their God. In vain, they continued invoking their senseless deity from morning till noon, when they tried a ritual dance to stir Baal into action. Then they resumed their prayers from noon till evening, all uttering the most piercing cries, using the most frantic gestures, and cutting themselves to add their blood to the sacrifice. In the fashion, really, of the Assyrians, and working themselves into a frenzy, of the Syrians, I should say, and working themselves into a frenzy, as did the Canaanites. No response was heard or seen. No fire descended. Elijah exposed their folly and fraud with taunts and sarcasm. And as the day was far advanced, he began his own operations, inviting the people to approach and see the entire proceeding. He first repaired an old altar of the Lord, which had perhaps been pulled down by Jezebel. Some Jewish commentators suggest that this altar may have been originally built by Saul in 1 Samuel 15:12. Then, having arranged the cut pieces of the young bull, he caused 4 barrels or jars of water to be dashed over the altar and round in the trench. Once, twice, a third time, this precaution was taken. And then, when Elijah had offered an earnest prayer, the miraculous fire descended and consumed not only the sacrifice, but the very stones of the altar. The impression on the minds of the people was that of admiration combined with awe. And with one voice, they acknowledged the supremacy of the Lord as the true God. Taking advantage of their aroused feelings, Elijah ordered them to seize the priests and then cause them to be killed. The natural features of Mount Carmel fit some of the details of this narrative remarkably well. The conspicuous high point, the place of burning on which the altars were placed, presents a platform spacious enough for altars and large audience of onlookers on 2 sides. It was a rocky soil on which there is an abundance of loose stones to furnish the 12 stones of which the altar was built. A bed of thick earth, in which was a trench, could be dug, and yet the earth not so loose that the water poured into it would be absorbed. 250 feet beneath this flat area, there is a perennial fountain from which, even in that season of severe drought, Elijah could procure those copious supplies of water which he poured over the altar. The distance between the spring and the site of the altar is so short as to make it perfectly possible to go there 3 times and back, whereas it would have been impossible once in the afternoon to fetch water from the sea. The summit is 1,000 feet above the Kishon, which nowhere flows from the sea so close to the base of the mount as just beneath the place of burning, so that the priests of Baal could, in a few minutes, be taken down to the river. Now, as we continue, the God will answer by sending fire. So in 22, verse 22, just to continue the narrative, notice the text reads, "And the people answered him not a word. Then Elijah said unto the people, I, even I, am left a prophet of the Lord, but Baal's prophets are 450. So he takes the 2 bullocks, as we've seen, and chooses 1 bullock for themselves, and cut it in pieces, and lay it on the wood. He would dress and he said, I will dress the other bullock and lay it on the wood. And call upon the name of your God, and I will call upon the name of the Lord. And the God that answers by fire, let him be God." I want to focus on that for just a minute. Notice it says, "Ani akra b'shem Adonai v'haya ha'Elohim asher ya'aneh va'esh hu ha'Elohim." The God who answers by fire, let him be God. And the people answered and said, Tov ha'davar. The word is good. It is interesting. One might wonder why Elijah chose fire, but fire was an element over which Baal supposedly reigned. For example, archaeology has discovered a limestone stela dated in the second millennium BC, which pictures Baal or Baal holding a thunderbolt in his hand. This is found, for example, in Schafer, the cuneiform text of Rosh Hashanah and Ugarit, and on plate 22, figure 2. Also, in the Ugaritic literature, there are several indications that Baal controls fire. One text reads, "He flashed lightning to the earth," and again, this is from an Ugaritic text. In another, Baal's house was filled with fire, and yet the fire only reinforced and did not destroy. Another text in Ugaritic, Elijah then calls for fire as a distinguishing sign of the true God. But then, as we move on in 22 and following, notice Elijah, or 25 and following, Elijah said unto the prophets of Baal, "Choose one bullock," and we've talked about that, "for yourself, and dress it for as many, and call on the name of the Lord, and put no fire under it." And they took the bullock which was given them, and they dressed it, and called on the name of Baal from morning unto evening. "O Baal, answer us." But there was no voice, nor any that answered. They danced in the halting wise around the altar which was made. Now notice the irony in 27. And it came to pass at noon, Zachariah, that Elijah mocked them, Vayachatel Bahem Eliah, and he said, Elijah mocked them, "Cry aloud." In other words, Kir'u b'kol gadol, cry with a great voice. Ki Elohim hu, for he is only a God. Either he is musing, notice hu ki sicha, or he has gone aside on a journey, v'chi sig lo, v'chi derek lo, he's on a journey, he's gone aside or on a journey, or perhaps he's sleeping. Ulai yashen hu ve'yikat, and he must be awakened. It's interesting as we look at the verse 27 here. After they're trying in vain all morning, that is, the priests of Baal, for a reply from Baal and receiving no answer, Elijah enters into some tremendous satire against Baal. Unlike Yahweh, in the pagan idolatries, the gods were subject to basic human functions of sleeping, eating, drinking, loving, having children, etc. In the Ugaritic text, Elijah's comments find illustration several times. El, for example, the sort of grandfather god, for example, is found sleeping. The text says, in a dream, the benign El, the kindly one, in a vision, the creator of creatures. So he is sleeping. In another text, Baal is discovered going hunting. His bow he took in his hand, his darts in his right hand. Then certainly he set his face towards the meadow full of buffalo. This is in Ugaritic text 7:6, volume 2, pages 2 to 9. So Elijah, possibly aware of these things, mockingly said these things as a satire against pagan mythology and idolatry. And so I'm just going to stop there, I think. We're going to continue seeing that there's going to be a storm and rain after this mockery, and the Ugaritic text sort of help us to understand some of the satire, uh, they cried aloud, they cut themselves with their swords and lances until blood gushed out. So this goes on. We had talked about this. Elijah said unto all the people, come near unto me. And all the people came near, and he repaired the altar of the Lord that was thrown down. And then Elijah took 12 stones, and we're going to see he offers up a burnt offering, fill 4 jars with water, and pour it on the burnt offering. We talked about that a minute ago. And he said, do it the second time, and they did it. And do it the third time, and they did it. And the water ran round the altar, and he filled the trench with water. And then it came to pass at evening of the offering of the evening offering that Elijah the prophet came near and said, O Lord, the God of Israel, of Isaac, and of Israel, hear, O Lord. And what is striking, let it be known today that you are God, and I am your servant. And hear me, O Lord. Verse 37. And that the people may know that you are the Lord, that you alone are the Lord God. Then we're told, notice in verse 38, that fire comes down. So verse 38, and then the fire of the Lord fell and consumed the burnt offering. V'tipol eish Adonai v'tochal et ha'olah. And not only the offering, the wood, the stones, the dust that licked up the earth, and that was in the trench. And when all the people saw it, they fell on their faces, and they said, the Lord, he is God. Vayomer Adonai hu ha-Elohim. Adonai hu ha-Elohim. And they repeat this over and over. The Lord, he is God. And so Elijah said unto them, we talked about the prophets of Baal and how Elijah speaks judgment against them. But then in 41, Elijah said unto Ahab, get up and eat and drink. There is the sound of an abundance of rain. Alei ushte kikol ha'amon hageshem. In other words, there's a mighty rainstorm coming. This is the way the first rains, former rains at the end of the dry season arrive from the west, and violently they seem to happen. So Ahab prepared a feast in verse 42, went up to eat and drink, and Elijah went up to the top of Carmel. He bowed himself down upon the earth and put his face between his knees. And he said to his servant, go up now, look toward the sea. And he went up and looked. There was nothing. And he said, go up 7 times. And so Ahab, by the way, kept in painful excitement by the agonizing scene, had eaten nothing all day. So he went up to eat. Elijah has further work to do, to pray that the Lord will fulfill his promise and send rain. So he sends Ahab off to refresh himself with food and drink, while he, far from taking rest and refreshment, could absorb himself in prayer. So the posture with the face between the knees, by the way, denotes an attitude of concentration and prayer. So in 23 or 43, he said to his servant, go up now and look toward the sea. And he went up and he looked, and there was nothing. And he said, like we said, go again 7 times. And it came to pass on the 7th time, he said, behold, a small cloud arises out of the sea as a man's hand. And he said then, go up, say unto Ahab, make ready your chariot and get down, that the rain does not stop you. interesting, but he's talking to Ahab and he says, "Get down, vered below ya'atzracha hagashim," that the rain does not stop you. So it came to pass in a little while that the heavens grew black with cloud and wind, and there was a great rain. Uh, it's interesting. God now has answered, Vayehi ad koach va'ad koach. It came to pass in a little while that the heavens, v'hashamayim hit kaderu, or kaderu, that the heavens grew black, and clouds, and a wind, and there was a great rain. And he concludes by saying, Vayehi geshem gadol. And so Ahab ran and went to Jezreel. And the hand of the Lord was with Elijah. Vayad Adonai hayata el Eliyahu. And he girded up his loins and ran before Ahab to the entrance of Jezreel. Now, as we think about some of the thoughts in this text, first of all, he said, "Go and look toward the sea." Elijah tells his servant to look to the west towards the Mediterranean Sea. This is the direction from which the fall rains came to Palestine. In fact, nearly all rains. From at least one vantage point close to the place of burning, one can catch a glimpse of the great sea. So he said, "I saw a little cloud." The servant returned to the sea 7 times as directed, and on the 7th trip he saw a little cloud. Such a momentary darkening followed by a deluge then of torrential rain is not uncommon in Palestine in late autumn. The Lord, in sending the rain at this time, though, demonstrates his supremacy over Baal. One text, for example, reads, "To the earth Baal reigned, and unto the fields the mighty one, the lovely one." Again, this is in Ugaritic text 126, pages 5 to 6. So Baal here is not the sender of the rain, but Yahweh. So tell him to get into his chariot. Elijah tells Ahab to get into his chariot and leave before he is stopped either by the river Kishon, being suddenly so swollen as to be impassable, or from the deep layer of dust in the arid plain being turned into thick mud, which would bog down the wheels. In the rainy season, the plain of Esdraelon was often very marshy. So Ahab left hastily for Jezreel, which is a distance about 17 miles, and he had a palace there. This race was performed in downpour, but no doubt all rejoiced in the weather, which brought a sudden refreshment to all the land of the region. So the Lord gave Elijah special strength. We're told that the hand of the Lord was upon Elijah, and he gave him special strength. And Vayad Adonai Hayata el Eliyahu. So with that special strength, unlike the chariot, which no doubt had to take certain detours, as well as the problem confronted by the mud, he, Elijah, could run a straight course ahead of the chariot. Attention has been drawn to some runners that can run for miles, but this is an illustration, I think, of the Lord's strength. Elijah possibly ran ahead of Ahab in order to act as a herald who would communicate Yahweh's victory over Baal. The result of this awesome contest was a heavy blow and great discouragement to the worship of Baal. But subsequent events seem to prove that the effects, though sharp, were but partial and temporary. And so Elijah is going to have to flee and flee for his life. And we'll see that in chapter 19. So I think I'm just going to stop there.